There's something most men don't want to admit, and it's that, no matter how independent, confident, and strong many women seem today, every single one of them, all of them, have emotional and psychological weaknesses that, if you know how to identify, you can use to your advantage. This isn't about manipulation. This is about understanding the emotional map of a woman and using that insight to connect with her in ways 99% of men can't even imagine. Has it ever happened to you that a woman seems into you, and then suddenly she goes cold, distant, hard to read? That's because you're not hitting the right buttons. You're not triggering her internal vulnerabilities, the ones just beneath the surface. Today I'm going to reveal 9 of those. But in this first part, we'll focus on just 3, and I promise you, if you truly understand and apply them with precision, you'll see her attitude shift, even if you don't say another word. Let's start with the first one. Most men think they can win a woman with logic, with arguments, with some cheap version of confidence. But if you really want to influence how she feels about you, you need to understand this first weakness, her constant need for selective emotional validation. And I emphasize selective because it's not about wanting attention from every guy, just from the ones she sees as high value. This is where Neil Strauss's principle in the game comes into play, what he called push and pull, or what Mystery defined as withholding validation to build attraction. The average woman is sick and tired of guys chasing her like she's a goddess. What triggers emotional vulnerability is when a man who clearly has options, who radiates social and emotional value, gives her crumbs of validation, but only when she earns it. That contrast between expectation and reward creates emotional addiction in her brain, like a slot machine that only pays out once in a while. Picture this. You're talking to her and she says, "I love the way you look at me." And instead of smiling like a fool and throwing yourself at her feet, you respond with a half-sarcastic grin. "Oh, really? I didn't know you were so observant." You're not returning direct validation. You're planting ambiguity. And that ambiguity, it creates obsession. It makes her question whether she really has emotional power over you. When you do it right, she starts investing more, starts trying to impress you, tries to win you over. That's when the tables turn. Because now, you're not playing her game, she's playing yours. Now let's move on to the second weakness. This one runs deeper, it's hidden. And if you know how to activate it, you'll stand out from every other guy orbiting her attention. I'm talking about the female narrative void. What is this? It's the inner emptiness many women feel when their life lacks an emotional storyline. Something that makes them feel unique, desired, important, alive. From a young age, women are conditioned to seek meaning through stories. Movies, novels, drama. They don't just want a relationship, they want to be the protagonist of a story. They want to feel like their life is a romantic, intense, one-of-a-kind experience. That's where you come in. The average guy offers stability, but what women crave is narrative, emotional intensity. They need to feel like being with you is stepping into a new chapter of their life. That's why if you're predictable, if your reactions are always the same, if you never spark extreme emotion, you become just another background character. You fade from memory. But if you're the guy who makes her live stories, even small ones, you create emotional anchors that are impossible to erase. Spontaneous outings, unexpected messages, deep confessions at the least expected moment. It's not about being dramatic, it's about crafting a storyline, making her feel like she's part of something beyond the ordinary. Robert Greene said it clearly in The Art of Seduction. The true seducer creates an atmosphere. He doesn't just win her over, he pulls her into a world where she stops thinking with logic and starts reacting with emotion. And once a woman enters your emotional world, she doesn't want to leave. Let's go with the third weakness, one of the most powerful and yet one of the most overlooked. The female tendency toward emotional conflict as proof of real connection. I know this might sound strange, but if you've dealt with emotionally intense women, you know what I'm talking about. Often, when a woman starts to feel something deep for you, she doesn't get calmer. She gets more chaotic, more unpredictable, more emotionally explosive. Why? Because many women, especially the more emotional ones or those with a turbulent past, associate conflict with emotional depth. If things are going too well, they don't trust it. It feels fake. So they start testing you, provoking you, challenging you. Not because they want to sabotage things, but because they want to confirm that you're emotionally involved too. And this is where most men lose. They get upset, they react, Or worse, they emotionally shut down. And that kills attraction. What you need to do in those moments is not show frustration, show presence, show solidity. Show that you won't collapse just because she brings a storm. Because when she sees that you can hold her chaos without drowning, she surrenders. You become her rock. And that doesn't just attract her, it makes her feel safe, deeply connected. And when you combine that with the first and second points we covered, you've got a woman who's emotionally addicted to your energy. One of the most powerful and yet most hidden weaknesses is this: a woman's deep desire to be discovered. I'm not talking about her looks, that's obvious. I'm talking about her inner world. Emotions, secrets, insecurities, contradictions. There's a part of the feminine soul that desperately wants someone to see beyond the mask. Because most men only look at the surface. They compliment her beauty, her body, the obvious stuff. But very few know how to see within. Do you know what happens when a woman feels that you're reading her emotionally better than she reads herself? She drops her guard. She connects. She gives in. Because, for the feminine mind, being understood without explaining feels like real love. How do you pull that off? Not with cliches, not with cheesy lines, with emotional observation, with statements like, "You act strong, but there's something in your eyes that tells me it wasn't always like that." Or, "I know you use that humor to hide what you're really feeling. You're not attacking. You're showing her that you see beyond the role she's playing." And that is addictive. This ties directly into a concept Mark Manson outlines in Models, being a genuine man, but with razor-sharp emotional radar. It's not about being a therapist, it's about recognizing what her soul is saying when her words are contradicting her energy, and using that to step in. Now let's move on to the fifth weakness, one of the most dangerous if you don't know how to handle it: the feminine attraction to what's forbidden. The forbidden is an archetypal force. From Eve and the apple to the most intense love stories, women are drawn to whatever makes them question their own rules. That's why so often a seemingly well-mannered woman ends up falling for a man who stands in total contrast to her carefully structured world. The mistake that good guys make, the rule followers, is thinking that being nice and proper will win her heart. But what they don't understand is this: what excites a woman isn't always what she thinks is right. It's what makes her break her own internal barriers. And I'm not telling you to be an emotional criminal. I'm telling you to be the kind of man who represents escape, disruption, emotional freedom. Because once she starts to associate you with a sense of being fully alive, even if she can't explain why, she won't be able to walk away. This is exactly why Mystery talked so much about disruptive value. A man who doesn't fully conform to her standards but still keeps her intrigued is the one who makes her vulnerable. How do you apply this subtly? If she comes from a conservative world, you show irreverence without being vulgar. If she's structured and by the book, you move with fluidity and unpredictability. If she's used to being in control, you don't give up control so easily. That's what triggers the desire for the forbidden, because you make her feel things that her environment never allowed her to experience. And now we come to the sixth weakness, one that gets triggered the moment you know how to handle emotional space: a woman's anxiety over what's left unsaid. This one is brutally effective if you know how to use silence, mystery, and timing. Women are used to men oversharing, explaining, justifying, emotionally stripping down way too soon. But a man who knows how to create tension without saying everything builds a delicious mental anguish inside her. This is what in advanced seduction is known as suggestive incompletion. A sentence left hanging, a story never finished, a hint that's never confirmed. All of it triggers a mental loop in her brain, a need to decode you. And while she's trying to figure you out, she's thinking about you, constantly. For example, let's say everything's going well, conversation's flowing, and out of nowhere you stop, look her in the eyes and say, "There's something I haven't told you yet, but I'm not sure you're ready to hear it." And you say nothing more. What happens? You've just created a crack in her mind. Now she has to know. She needs to know. And now you become the central figure in her attention. Because people often forget what was said, but they never forget what was left unsaid. You can even use this in texting, on social media, in voice notes. Don't reveal everything. Don't explain everything. Drop fragments, loose pieces, and let her be the one to build the puzzle. And during that process, she becomes obsessed. Let's move on to the seventh weakness. One of the most underrated keys in the game of seduction is this: a woman's deep need to feel chosen above others. And I'm not talking about telling her she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Anyone can say that. I'm talking about a hidden, hierarchical form of validation, where she feels, subconsciously, that you have options, but you're choosing her. And that kind of choice, when done right, creates an insane level of emotional attachment. Women crave what's scarce, and a man who is truly valuable, who has real abundance, automatically becomes scarce. The fact that you don't need her attention, yet you still look at her, make her laugh, touch her with intention, creates a powerful internal tension. She wants to hold on to the spot she suspects other women also want. This is where a strategy Neil Strauss shared during a private talk in Vegas comes in. Something that wasn't even in the game. The idea of the hidden alpha position. That means projecting value without bragging, being the man who doesn't compete, because he already won. You express that in your energy, in your timing, in the way you don't chase, but you don't ignore either, in the way you make her feel seen, not out of need, but out of choice. A clear example: you're with her at a party or social event. She notices other women are checking you out. You know it too, but you don't react. You don't flex or show off. You simply turn to her and say, "Not everyone knows what I'm really looking for, but you might be closer than most." That sentence alone, it places her in a privileged position, not because of looks, not because of a cheap compliment, but through emotional insinuation, and that drives her insane. Now let's talk about the eighth weakness. One of the most emotional ones, and precisely for that reason, one of the easiest to manipulate if you don't use it ethically. The feminine desire for emotional redemption. Ever notice how many women are drawn to men who seem broken? Not because they're toxic, but because there's this subconscious need inside them to heal someone. It comes from a deep emotional conditioning. If they can transform a man, touch his soul, change him, they feel like they've earned real emotional worth. This pattern is extremely common, and it can play in your favor if you know how to build the right emotional frame. It's not about playing the victim. That reeks of neediness. It's about showing cracks. Not all of them, just enough, like a measured confession. Something like, "I've had my demons, but there are people who've managed to touch parts of me even I didn't know existed." That single line, it activates her redemption instinct because now she wants to be that person. The one who reaches your hidden parts, the one who understands you, the one who transforms you. And in trying to do that, she bonds with you on an emotional level deeper than anything physical. And if you get a woman emotionally invested before sex, you've got her full attention. This is the same technique that artists and musicians use, even those who aren't physically attractive, and still create legions of obsessed women. Why? Because they make women feel like they can heal them. That gives women a sense of emotional purpose, a feeling of exclusive value. And now we come to the ninth weakness in this section, one that most men overlook, but natural seducers activate without even realizing it: a woman's weakness for erotic anticipation. And this goes way beyond just sex. This is about building a field of sensual tension, without touching, without kissing, without even saying it outright. Ever heard of the slow burn? It's the art of building tension slowly, step by step, without rushing, letting her imagination do 80% of the work. It's like her mind starts to fill in the blanks with fantasies you've only suggested. For example, a casual brush of your hand, a long-held gaze without explanation, an ambiguous line dropped in at the perfect time. You have no idea what I'm thinking when you look at me like that. You haven't said anything explicit, but you just planted a seed that'll grow in her mind for days, because anticipation is more powerful than the act itself. Esther Perel breaks this down brilliantly in her book, Erotic Intelligence. What triggers desire isn't instant availability. It's tension. It's the promise. The almost. And if you know how to play that game, you create a psychological effect known as anticipatory resonance, where she begins to associate your presence with pleasure, even before anything happens. Highly emotional women respond to this intensely, because their mind is their primary pleasure organ. And if you control her mind, you control her desire. The game, then, isn't physical, it's imaginative. And the men who know how to build that kind of desire, without touching, are the ones she never forgets. And even though we've already uncovered 9 of her core weaknesses, now it's time to go deeper into how to use them strategically in different contexts. Face-to-face conversations, social media, texting, body language, and also in long-term relationships. Because knowing these weaknesses is one thing, but knowing how to activate each one at the right moment, that's what separates an advanced seducer from the rest. Let's start with the most common situation. Face-to-face conversations. This is where the first major feminine filter gets triggered. Your energy. A woman might forget what you said, but she'll never forget how you made her feel. That's why every weakness we discussed should never feel like a forced technique. It should come off as part of your natural expression. For example, when you're face-to-face, selective emotional validation has to feel authentic. Don't just tell her she looks good like you're handing out compliments. Make it feel like a spontaneous observation, then break the pattern with humor or irony. She asks, "Do you like my perfume?" And you respond, "Yeah, though it's a shame it doesn't smell as good as your ego." Pause. Smile. Silence. That kind of game throws her ego off balance, but intrigues her, because she doesn't know if you're flirting or challenging her. That's where emotional investment begins. Another face-to-face weapon, tension through pauses. Most guys talk too fast because of nervous energy, but a man who masters silence creates an almost hypnotic atmosphere. You look her in the eyes, then slowly glance away, then pause before you speak. That pause forces her to tune in, to follow you, to enter your rhythm. You're not just communicating with words, you're generating energy. Now let's talk about using these weaknesses through texting and social media, which is where most guys fail, because they stay logical when they should be triggering emotion. This is where the art of suggestive incompletion comes in. Don't always reply quickly. Don't explain everything. Drop lines that leave space for imagination. Like, "Sometimes I think things about you I probably shouldn't say yet." That line says nothing, but it says everything. It opens a door in her mind. Another lethal texting technique is using double framing. Example, "I had a dream about you today, but not the way you think." What happens? You've opened 2 pathways, one emotional, one erotic, and she doesn't know which one you meant. That ambiguity, that's what creates obsession. And if she responds with something simple like, "What did you dream?" don't give her the full answer. Give her a fragment. "I just remember your mouth, but I won't say whether it was a kiss or a bite." You're playing. Subtle. Suggestive. Never vulgar. That leaves her mentally wrapped up in you for hours. Now let's level up. How do you trigger these weaknesses on actual dates? Not just the first one, but those that come after when things seem fine, but you want her emotionally hooked? This is where you apply the emotional narrative dynamic. It's not enough for the date to be fun. It has to have emotional rhythm, a moment of laughter, a moment of depth, a moment of tension, a moment of silence, a moment of physical closeness. And then, withdrawal. Just like a great movie, you need to take her through contrasting emotions. Because emotional contrast is what creates addiction. Don't give her everything on the first date, but don't be closed off either. Show a crack, a carefully chosen vulnerability, and then close it. Say something like, "I don't usually share this on first dates, but sometimes I find it hard to connect unless I feel like the other person's energy is different." And then, you say nothing more. Change the topic. She'll dwell on that line all night. Those are the moments she replays in her head before falling asleep. Not what you ate, not what movies you talked about. That one instant. Those lines that open unanswered questions. That's where deep attraction gets seated. Now let's go into a more advanced level, using body language as a weapon of emotional activation, because your body always communicates. And if you use it well, you can trigger almost all her weaknesses without saying a word. For example, the way you take a sip of your drink without breaking eye contact, the way you touch her back while walking, not like a random touch, but with intent, with direction, not a casual brush, a statement of presence, or simply choosing to sit next to her instead of across from her. That creates a silent sense of togetherness, a we against the world, not a cold face-to-face where she feels evaluated. You're designing a sensory experience, not an interview. And if you pair that with the right vocal pacing, slow, deep, with calculated pauses, you start to generate an invisible electromagnetic field. Her body feels it before her mind even understands it. And once she feels your energy is different, every other man around her disappears. Now let's go even deeper. How do you use these weaknesses in long-term relationships when you're already part of her life, but you still want to keep the desire, the mystery, and the emotional connection alive? Here's where the principle of controlled emotional unpredictability comes in. This doesn't mean being erratic or chaotic. It means that she can never fully predict how you'll respond emotionally. Because desire dies when emotional patterns become too familiar. That's why, in a long-term relationship, sometimes you need to disconnect without warning, not emotionally, but energetically. You're present, but not fully given. Then you come back, with intensity, then pull back again, like the tide. She doesn't know if you're about to kiss her or analyze her. That ambiguity, when handled correctly, keeps the sexual and emotional tension burning. Even in sex, this becomes key. Your touch shouldn't follow the same rhythm every time. Your voice shouldn't always have the same tone. Your gaze, sometimes intense, sometimes distant. All of that keeps her from getting too comfortable. Because with you, there's always something new, something that can turn her on or throw her off balance. And that's how her mind stays active. Her desire stays alive. Her emotional need to hold on to you stays burning. You've seen it now. Women aren't some unsolvable mystery. They're not as unpredictable as most men think. The truth is, most guys don't know where to look. They don't understand that beneath the beauty, the confidence, the behavior, there are deep emotional weaknesses. And if you know how to trigger them, they open doors no other man will ever reach. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about playing with feelings. It's about understanding the female emotional map, her shadows, her voids, her unspoken needs, and becoming the man who can read all of that in silence, without asking, without begging, just by being you, but with strategy, with emotional intelligence, and with inner mastery. And the most powerful part of all this is that once you learn how to activate those 9 weaknesses, you don't just create attraction. You create obsession. You create emotional bonding. You create memories she won't be able to bury, even if she tries. So if this content made you think, if it gave you clarity on things no one ever explained before, then this channel is for you. Because this isn't about cheesy pickup lines or recycled advice. This is about going deep, getting real, using what actually works. If you want more content like this, if you want to learn how to read a woman with a single glance, how to trigger her desire without even touching her, how to make her invest more in you than you do in her, then hit subscribe now, turn on notifications, and most importantly, drop a comment below telling me which weakness you found most powerful, or which one you want to master next. This isn't a game, it's an art, and we're here to master it, together. I'll see you in the next video where we'll keep breaking down the female mind and teaching you how to become the kind of man no woman can ignore.